Welcome to Check-In with Jason Lortzen, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and that fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone who is leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation to help both educate and inspire us. Today's guest is Wendy Rummler. Wendy is the Chief People Officer at Credit Acceptance, where she oversees the company's people strategy, shaping a culture of inclusion, engagement, and professional development. Wendy has been with Credit Acceptance in various roles since December of 2001. So she's coming up on a 25-year anniversary, which is pretty amazing and awesome. Wendy, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me, Jason. I'm excited to talk to you today.
So I like to always start these conversations by checking in with you and getting to know a little bit more about you and your organization to kind of set some context for this conversation. So first question I have, can you tell us a little bit more about Credit Acceptance as an organization, and then a little bit about kind of what you do, maybe a little more about your role?
Yeah, so I'll start with Credit Acceptance. So we are a 52-year-old company, going to celebrate our 53rd anniversary this summer. And we provide auto financing through a nationwide network of automobile dealers. We're unique in that our product fills a very crucial gap in the auto financing industry for adults that wouldn't otherwise qualify for traditional funding. So about 45% of the adults in the United States have subprime or no credit and struggle to find financing. And that's really the market we've been in for over 52 years, is filling that gap. So we like to say that we make car ownership possible for anyone, regardless of your credit history. And we're really proud to be offering that to our consumers. From a demographic standpoint, Credit Acceptance has about 2,500 employees. We are a remote first organization, so we have team members across the country in all 50 states. That was a transition we made following the pandemic. For me, as you said, I joined Credit Acceptance when I was just 24 years old back in 2001. I've held various roles at the organization, but now I find myself in the Chief People Officer seat. A little bit unique because I was in finance and accounting for my first 19 years at Credit Acceptance, but dabbled in areas of HR. So when our current CEO became CEO, he asked me to take the HR team. And it's been something that I have found very challenging and rewarding, dealing with the people side of the house, especially as we've gone through this transition to a remote company, because that is something we had no experience with prior.
Well, and that's one of the things I was interested in learning about you was how, your history, starting as, I think, as I recall, a financial analyst in 2001, being in finance for 19 years, and then it seems sort of suddenly you make the move into leading HR. How did that happen? Or what was the pull to, obviously there was some signal, or you were sort of obviously intrigued, or something was going on there. So how do you end up in HR?
It's interesting from a title perspective, it seems sudden. If you were within the organization, probably starting, at about the 15-year point in my career at Credit Acceptance, my title could have been Vice President of Stuff. I started absorbing areas of the organization. So while I was sitting in the finance team, I was responsible for compensations. I was responsible for benefits, office services, workforce management, payroll. So there was a lot of different arms of the company that I was already responsible for. And I had started getting into the engagement side of it with managers and HR. So it was actually more natural than it sounds when Ken became our CEO. For him to ask me to lead the HR team was actually probably a very natural flow. And I really think it's because the number side helped me be able to analyze those things, but I really enjoyed the people side of the house. You need people to execute on your strategies, and people are tough and in not black and white like numbers. So I always felt like it was a challenge to me being your typical accountant. And I think that's what drew me to it, just trying something new, challenging myself in a different way.
Well, and I have to imagine that it's also really helpful to have, number one, the longevity of being a part of this culture for a couple of decades. but also having lived in the culture outside of HR for some period of time, I would assume gives you a perspective that, a lot of times, when people join, they come from one HR organization into a different organization, HR organization in a different company, and everything's sort of seen through the lens of HR or the work of HR. And I think it's different when you can see it from a different lens and bring that along when you're making decisions or you're sorting through what to do in the HR function. It's helpful to have that perspective, I would think.
Yeah, I think you're actually spot on there. In some of my roles, while very financial driven, for example, one of them is I was responsible for all of the monthly incentive compensation for our 1,200-ish team members in operations. So I had a very good sense of what drove them, what motivated them, how they were paid, some of the challenges they faced in their roles, because my teams designed all of their pay plans. So even taking that perspective, once you sit in the HR seat, when you're talking about how do we want to develop these people and what challenges might they have or how we're performance managing, I did bring with me a whole lot of knowledge about how the business functions and really strong, lasting relationships. Because the interesting thing is, I'm not unique to credit acceptance in having been there a little over 23 years. Many of my peers are equal or longer than I have. So having those relationships moving into HR, being able to influence some of the decisions in direction we want to go was very helpful.
So now that you've been like fully in this HR seat now for a number of years, what part of this work do you love the most? What's your favorite part of the role of leading HR?
Honestly, it's and we say our motto is we change lives, but it is that part. We say we have 5 constituents: our dealers, who are our primary customer, our consumer, the team member, the communities in which we operate, and our shareholders. But when you have people that are coming to work every day, trying their hardest, really changing their lives and succeeding together, and seeing that person that you thought might not succeed in their role actually succeed or even get promoted out of their role, it has a different level of meaning in your day-to-day work. So I think that's what I love the most, the relationships with the people and the real impact that we have on the folks that are working so hard every day at our company.
I think that comes through not just in hearing you tell your story, but also certainly you have a lot of external validation that the organization walks that talk, that is really committed to people. And that's part of the reason that I was really eager to have this conversation with you, is because credit acceptance, actually, you came onto my radar because I had done some work with the USA Today team at their Top Workplaces National Awards, and that's how I became aware of your organization. But then I started digging in, and it's hard not to be impressed by the trophy case that you all have amassed in terms of your culture and your workplace. And so in addition to the USA Today Top Workplace nationally, which you just picked up more hardware recently,
Yep.
Again, People Magazine, Company That Cares, Fortune Best Company to Work For lists that everybody knows about. And there's a whole bunch more, right? There's more, but I'm not going to list them all. And when we were initially talking about this, you attributed many of these awards, or sort of one of the factors that has made those awards possible or helps you create the workplace that is award worthy, is your listening culture, which I think is really fascinating. So I would love for you to kind of unpack, what does it mean for you to have a listening culture? Like, what does that mean at Credit Acceptance?
Yeah. And having been here as long as I have, I've been on both sides, right? I worked at Credit Acceptance when we didn't have the trophy case of awards. And before it was kind of popular, we set this goal in 2001 to become a great place to work. And it took us from 2001 to 2014 when we were first named to Fortune for the first time. So one thing I would say to anyone that's listening is this is a journey. This is not something that you flip a switch. But what got us there is what you're referring to, and is our listening culture. So we were, working towards trying to improve our culture. And it was in about 2007 that we did our first engagement survey with the Great Place to Work Institute, because you had to have at least 1,000 employees. And that first engagement survey came back, I think, as 69%. So 69% of our team members said they considered credit acceptance a great place to work. For 5 years, we bubbled around 69, 68, 70, 71. And it wasn't for a lack of trying. Like we were trying. We read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, and chapter 4 talks about confronting the brutal facts. And the brutal facts comes along with listening to what people say, and that the people closest to the work know the most about it. And we really embraced that and started to listen to what people were telling us, our team members. And it's more than just asking and listening, it's responding. So I would say that's what makes our listening culture unique at Credit Acceptance. We actually have a standard that we require, might be strong, but we encourage all leaders to use. And that is, when you ask a question or you listen, whether it's through a survey or a roundtable or what have you, you need to respond in one of 3 ways. So no response is not an option. You're either going to respond and say, great idea, we're going to do that, help me implement whatever that feedback is, or we're not going to do that. You're going to state a position, is what we call it, and explain why. The answer can't just be no. Why are we not going to do it? What are the facts, the data, the rationale? And then the third is, I need more information. So that may sound like a good idea, but I need more information, because a lot of our listening posts are anonymous, so people feel comfortable putting their true feedback out there. So we really just went deep into that from that point, really around 2012. And that engagement score in 2012 went from a 70 to an 84. And then in 2013, it was like a 90. And we have now been, 90 to 90. I think our highest ever was a 94, but we've low to mid 90s for the last, 12 years. And we always go back. We get the results. We share the results. We ask for input from our team. Hey, you told us this. We're seeing this in the comments. What do you mean by that? And it's just a practice. And the most interesting thing for me is when we'll have new leaders join and we talk about this listening culture. Inevitably, 3, 6, 9 months in, I'll have a conversation with them and they'll say, wow, I didn't really know what you meant. Like, you really mean listening. And it's not just hearing, it's listening and reacting and considering. And it's changed who we are as an organization for sure.
Right. That is, well, it's fantastic. And I think that, like, this is such a important thing, because I think oftentimes when you hear organizations talk about their listening culture, they're focused on the asking component part of it. And they ask a lot of questions, they use a lot of surveys, they're doing a lot of pulses, and then they're getting data back. And then somebody somewhere is doing a bunch of analysis on this data, but they're forgetting that response piece, and that's one of the things I preach all the time, is that anytime you're a survey or you're asking a question or you're checking in with an employee, you're opening a feedback loop. And a feedback loop has to be closed. If you don't close a feedback loop, then it starts to undermine trust.
It's worse than not opening it. And we
exactly
actually caution
right.
leaders, we want you to listen, but before you ask the question, be certain that what is your action going to be after, because you will destroy trust. You will make the outcome worse than if you never asked.
Yeah. If you are unwilling to take action to improve whatever it is you're about to ask about, you do not ask.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I think the other part that we have gained trust, respect, whichever word you want to use over the years, is we do say no. We have a process 2 times a year where we do ask the senior leadership. So people can submit any question they want through an anonymous forum. And then there's 2 weeks that team members get to vote up or down. Like, do you want us to answer that? Yes or no? Like, are you really interested in this question? Anything that has net up votes, generally 25 to 30 questions every time we do this, we'll respond. And there is a fair amount of those that the answer is we're going to state a position as to why we're not doing it. A lot of
Right.
thought goes into those responses because you're posting them out there on our internal internet for people to read. But you can't not respond. Like that's not an option. You have to say yes or no, or I'm taking action.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we also then have a process that says of the ones you say yes, how many have you completed? And we report that out on a quarterly basis to tell team members we said we would take action on X number of questions. We've completed this. Like it's that loop that you talk about.
Yeah, it's feedback loops. People expect feedback loops to be closed. When you open a feedback loop, it creates an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And then that expectation has to be resolved in one way or the
In
other.
one way or another.
Otherwise, it's like you made a commitment to me that you didn't follow through on. That is really incredible. And I love the upvote and the downvote. And I love the no because I have, that's been one of the things that's been pretty clear to me. And I know in a minute we're going to dive into kind of your move from in-office to remote first. But one of the things that I have been sharing, with my clients and the people that I work with is that I think so much of the noise around the return to office is not about the decision being made. It's about the lack of why being shared. So often it's like, it doesn't like, yes, and here's why, no, and here's why. I just have found people generally, if they understand the why, they may not like the answer, they may not like the decision, but they will respect the decision if they understand the rationale behind it.
Yep, for sure.
And this is really powerful what you're doing. That's a way of bringing that into it. And so I'm curious if you have an example of something that your listening culture or sort of your listening practices really helped you identify and address. I'm sure there's probably hundreds of examples, but is there one that stands out to you that is kind of a shining example of what a listening culture does for you when you're trying to maintain a great workplace?
I mean, honestly, I don't know if there's one that stands out. There is so many. I mean, down to policies and how we interact with our consumers. So we'll get feedback that the call scripts that I have to follow from a compliance perspective this is one that happened probably in the last year and a half, doesn't allow me to be as empathetic as I want to be to the consumer. So this is what we're hearing from our account solution specialists. They're telling me the struggle that they're going through, and this is why they haven't paid their bills. And I have to go ask them 4 questions that are contrary to what they just told me. They told me they can't afford it, yet you're saying I should ask, why can't you? Can you make a promise? Following the call script. So we got a lot of feedback, very loud from our account solution specialists that I want to follow the law and be compliant. Obviously, we're in a highly regulated industry, but I also want to be empathetic to the consumer. And we changed our call scripts. The head of our account solutions, vice president over there, Kathy Concert, worked with the team to keep enough structure around the call scripts to make sure we were being compliant, but to give them the leeway that they wanted to handle those consumers depending on their situation. So I think that's one great example that really changes what your day-to-day work is when you show up in the quality of having those conversations and helping both themselves and our consumers.
Well, it's a fantastic example of, I think, also a misconception that many have about engagement work, or how do you create, when you're doing culture or employee engagement work, is that we oftentimes, I think leaders often assume that it's always about something like, like it's always about perks, or it's always about, the touchy-feely stuff. And so often it's like, no, I want to do a great job. And the way that you have designed that I have to do my work, or where I have to do my work, or the tools that you're giving me are actually getting in my way. And that's the thing that I would like you to address so that I can do better work. And it's amazing how important and powerful that is if you're listening, so I that's an incredible example.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the extra snacks, if you will, everyone likes, but it doesn't actually make you like where you're working any better if the people that you work for you can't trust, or you don't like the job, or it's challenging and frustrating. We spend too much time at our jobs. And I do believe one of our pride values under respect says assume positive intent. And I truly believe the vast majority of people that get up every morning, they go to work, want to do their best. And if you start with that in mind and assume that they're asking the question from a good place, or they want to make a difference and do a good job, you answer it different than if you assume, oh, they're just trying to get the next perk out of me or make their job easier.
100%. I am on that. I am aligned with you on that. And I think that's such a powerful mindset shift for people, is that if you operate with that assumption, then everything looks different, right? That feedback looks different. It feels different. The whole reason to listen and ask takes on a whole different meaning and gravity, as opposed to like, I think there are some people that try to make this work, or the people that don't want to do the hard work that is involved in a listening culture try to frame it as entitlement.
Yep.
Right. It's just asking about entitlements. And it's like, not if you're doing it right. Not if you're doing it right. That's not what this work is about. So one of the things we have to talk about, because it's so interesting, and I think you are an example, or a really relevant and important example, I think right now, of a company that has gone, what I would say is sort of the opposite of the way the stream seems to be carrying so many organizations. And so for a little bit of context for those, this is something that I found amazing, is that number one, your organization has been on that Fortune. You talked about, you made the best companies to work for list, that Fortune list. And then you've been on it 11 of the past 12 years.
Yes.
And so that's a pretty incredible track record.
Yep.
But more important than that, I think, or more interesting, is that in the middle of that, you went from being what you described as a very in-office culture to now being a remote-first culture, yes. Which there are tons of people out there that will try to tell us that you cannot maintain the same kind of culture when you go remote first that you have in office. We have lots of people gaslighting us about the fact that you just can't do it at scale in remote, and you are evidence that that is objectively false. And so I would love to talk about what that transition looked like. I know it started in the, obviously the pandemic forced everybody into that, but then you stayed there. So would you share the story of kind of how that evolved in terms of how you went from in-office to remote?
Yeah. And to give you some context, you said we were primarily an in-office company, and like, probably more than folks could understand. Like when we went home for the pandemic on March 16th or whatever it was, as an executive, I didn't have a laptop. Like you worked in the office on your desktop. That's where you worked. We had 25%-ish of our team members were sales folks. They worked supporting the dealers in their home state, home cities. The rest of us worked in 2 cities in a brick and mortar building every day. Largely because we did not believe we could sustain this amazing culture if we weren't all together. That was our basis. Like, no, we had been asked for years in that whole Ask Your Senior Leadership that I was describing earlier. Can we try having some work from home? No, we won't be able to sustain our culture, was our answer. That was our why. We can't do it. And then we were forced to do it. And so we transitioned home. It was a little bit difficult, as you can imagine, when no one has laptops, to move home. Thankfully, our team members stepped up. Many had equipment. We got equipment for those that didn't. And then we put our listening culture in overdrive. We initially thought it was going to be for the weeks or months that we were going to have to be at home. Like, how are people doing? What do you need? What support do you need? But as that was happening, we were also looking at our operating metrics and seeing that, wow, performance is holding up just fine. Like we're touching the accounts. People are as productive, as utilized. We're getting work done. So what does our team believe? So we started surveying them. Do you like working from home? Do you not want to work from home? Will you want to be hybrid? And we started surveying on a regular basis. The initial feedback in the summer of 20 was, I just want to know what the next 12 months hold. Like, right? Everyone's children were supposed to be homeschooled. And what am I going to do if I have to come back into the office? So we made a commitment in August of 20 and said, we will not make a decision about coming back into the office until the end of this school year. So everyone can just stop worrying about that. You have this school year off the table. The soonest we're coming back is July of 21. But then we continued to listen and look at data, and team members said, wow, I really like this balance. And in December of 20, our CEO, then Brett Roberts, always a very bold, decisive person, said, no, we're doing this. And he sent a communication to the entire organization that said, we're staying remote. We are never going to make you come back. You can come back. We actually thought we would end up in more of a hybrid where people would come back. We quickly learned people don't want to come back 3 or 4 days a week. They only want to come back if there's a reason, a meaningful reason to interact with people. You don't want to drive in just to sit at your desk and work. But when he made that commitment so early on, I think it was a different perspective. Like it allowed us to go, okay, this is where we're going. Let's make it work. When you don't know where you're going to end up, you're not as focused on making it successful. Coupled with that, we had been recognized 7 times by the Great Place to Work list up to that point. We were an amazing culture, and we valued that, and we saw such a clear correlation with our financial performance, the success of the company, the talent we were able to attract and retain. We could not lose it. We were determined not to lose it. And we just became very intentional. I think another great example of our listening culture is we launched a project that at the time we called Enhance Hybrid Culture, because again, we thought it would be hybrid. Now I would say it's remote first. And we had all executives, VPs and up, conducted over 30 roundtables, sliced by level in the organization, department, tenure, if you were a people leader, not a people leader, high performer, not high performer, just so we could get a really good cross-section of what people needed. And we asked, what do you need? Like, what do you need from a technology perspective? What do you need from a support perspective, from a people interaction perspective? And as you can imagine, we got tons of feedback and we built a plan. This is what we're going to start executing on to make this work. And here we are, 5 years later, and it's working. It's working well. And we have access to talent. Our CTO is from California. Our chief product marketing officer is from Boston. We have hired people across the country, and it works very well.
It's fantastic. So what for you has been, as you've made that transition, what have you found to be the most challenging part? Like, what has been the most difficult part of maintaining that culture with being remote first?
Initially, it was the onboarding. So, when you were hired into credit acceptance, we didn't have a really formal onboarding, a day and a half of information of what we do, the policies, but then you were kind of thrust into who we were. Like you came into our building and you could feel the culture, how people interacted. That was gone. So initially that was a big challenge. How do we allow folks at home to see who we are? So one of the first things we started doing was we developed it's a 12-month onboarding program that from a week before you start, you get your equipment early. Someone takes you through getting that set up. So the first day isn't overwhelming. You're put with a cohort of people. If you're at a higher level where you're managing people, we set up for you all the meetings you need over the first couple of weeks so you can meet the people that you're going to have to interact with. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. So when I do the roundtable at about the 90 to 120 day mark, I consistently hear, I have never had an experience like this. That whole onboarding and people really being introduced to credit acceptance was probably our first big challenge. After that, it was just the communications and making sure everybody was on the same page of what our mission is and coming together. So we put different processes in place there. So going back to your question, one of the other things is just people getting to know each other. So we instituted some policies of cameras on, upload your pictures into Workday so people could see who you are, and on Teams. Seems like simple things, but putting a face to a voice is very different level of engagement than being behind a computer screen where you can't see people, we introduced things called regional roundtables. So in the 5 hub cities, as we've grown nationally, we have concentrations of team members. Tampa, Atlanta, Texas. So we'll do once a quarter, a regional roundtable. We send an executive. Anyone within a 2-hour driving radius is welcome to come in. You meet the executive, you meet each other. And, 4 years into this now, when I go, people are hugging each other. They haven't seen each other since last quarter. So it was just, the challenge was recreating that feeling more than anything that you got when you were in the building. So just being very, very intentional about it.
Having the kind of culture you had and then shifting, how much reskilling or sort of support did you have to provide to your managers and leaders on managing in this new context with it being remote versus in office face-to-face? Like, I'm curious what that looked like.
Yeah, we definitely had to have focus on that because, for our operations, one of the big parts of their development is you do side-by-sides with your leader. Your leader comes, sits right next to you, listens to you on the call, provides feedback. So we use technology for some of that. So you can do side-by-sides via technology. Your boss is listening into the call and providing feedback. But also we developed, leading in a remote environment, some trainings for managers. We implemented a facilitative leadership program that all new leaders come to. It's a 3-day thing, 3-day training in person to talk about how you can facilitate discussions and lead. But obviously now it has a remote focus on it because we're not together. So yeah, you really have to, and in most of it is training leaders again on being intentionally just talking about life and how your team member is doing. These were conversations you had when you bumped into each other in the hallway that you took for granted. So when you got in your one-on-one meeting, you got right to business. Well, in this remote setting, we need to have those meetings where we get right to business, but we also need the other stuff. So leaders have set up what they call coffee chats or team meetings where they interact. So making sure they set time aside for the informal, getting to know the person. And then one other data piece that we actually found working through another company that was on the Great Place to Work list, they had done some research and found that there was a very direct correlation between the frequency of meaningful conversations with your direct leader and how you felt about the organization, right? Not surprising, but if you met once a week versus every other week versus once a month, like you saw those engagement scores drop materially. And I see it in our data. People that meet with their leader once a week, on average, their engagement scores are 96% or higher. Down to people that meet once a month, you're in the 60s. So little simple things. So now we ask and we have that, and then we report back to our leaders like, you got to meet with your team members. You need to have these meaningful conversations. If you're not meeting with them, how can they possibly think, A, you care about them, or know if they're meeting your expectations? So again, it seems like the simple little things, but it's hard and it has to be intentional. It has to be a priority.
Well, let me just say, this is really inspiring work, really exceptional work. And I love the undertone here is there's so much talk about, data and how to use data in HR and being more data informed in HR. But it's like, as listening to you talk, this is what it sounds like in actual practice.
Yes.
You're collecting data and you're looking at data, and then you're using that to inform decisions and practice and process. And it's really exceptional work. So thank you for being willing to share your story.
I appreciate that very much.
So there's a couple of questions I like to ask everyone that joins me for these conversations. And so one of them is, what is a current challenge that you have, a challenge or obstacle that you're wrestling with at work right now?
Probably the biggest one is, in this remote setting, we're probably about 2 years in. As a company, we have embarked on this transformation. So historically, not the remote transformation, a different transformation. Historically, we've been very project based in our work. And we have been transforming how we work to be more product faced, more test and learn. You don't have a set project team that starts, in January and ends in May, and you get these deliverables. But it's a big shift in how we work. So you have to be much more collaborative and work outside of your function of HR. You have to, work with all the other departments. And it's been a challenge more because we're remote. Had we been in the building, you could facilitate these things a little bit more. But as we've thought about these intentional get-togethers, we'll create cross-functional meetings where we have our product and engineering and analytics team getting together and doing just get to know yous and asking questions. So when they have a question for someone, you don't feel silly picking up the phone or calling them on Teams. But that's been a big challenge. We're upgrading our technology stack, and we're trying to shift to a more innovative test and learn, fail fast, which is a cultural change. So managing that from afar, we're making progress, but it's change and people resist change. So that's probably the biggest challenge that we're working on right now.
Well, I can also imagine this is one of those things where a strength becomes a potential liability. Whereas if you have a lot of folks that have tenure and have been around a long time and have done it the same way for a long time, and now you're saying wait a minute, this has worked really well for us. Why are you asking me to change this thing up? I'm sure that is probably not an easy sell.
You hit the nail on the head there. Not only do we have very tenured people, if you had a moment to look at our financials, if you look back 20 years, we have been ridiculously successful. I mean, the stock was at $9 when I started. I think it was at $4.92 the other day, and it's been as high as $700 in recent years. So not only have I always done it this way, it's actually worked very well. We've been very successful. So why are you asking me to change? But like the rest of the world, things evolve, and we have to get quicker and we have to respond to changes. So it's just explaining the why and continuing to make adjustments and listen. We've retrospects. I mean, you'll hear me say listen all the time, but everybody wants to succeed. So people will tell you what you need to do to help them out.
Yep. Excellent. So my last big question is really one that I love always to kind of see what different perspectives come out of this. But as you think about the future, when you think about work, let's project out 5 years, and I'm talking about work broadly, right? Work everywhere, big capital W work. What do you hope will be different about work or about how we think about work in 5 years than it is today?
Honestly, I hope more companies will put the people at the center. I think we did that for a short period of time around the pandemic. The year or two following, because everyone had the same challenge and it was scary even for the people making the decision. So people became the focus. But as we've moved out of that, you go back to focusing on other things and, you can come back in and you don't need to be as concerned with well-being, or we're not going to put as much budget towards well-being. And I would love to see a shift in that, because what I think people miss is people are what make your business successful. So if you keep putting them at the center of everything, your business is going to be more successful. I mean, you see it all the time. The proof are in really successful companies. And that doesn't, to your point earlier, just mean that you're working at a really nice company where everyone's overly friendly. And it is a direct, hardworking, we all want to succeed, I want to do well in my career. It's not all the fuzzy stuff, soft stuff, but it is caring about people first. So in 5 years, I'd like if more companies embrace that.
Me too. I'm on board with that. I love that. All right. Well, the wrap always these conversations up by asking a check out question. So Wendy, in one word, how are you feeling as we wrap up our conversation today?
Proud to be part of a Credit Acceptance.
Yeah. And for me, it's inspired. I legitimately I get the opportunity to peek inside of a lot of organizations and, have these conversations. And I've been doing this work for a long time, including when I was working with a company that did best places to work programs. And this is truly an exceptional body of work that you're doing. And so I'm really inspired by what you're doing, and I'm inspired by the fact that you so openly and generously share. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, if people want to learn more about you or the organization or connect with you, where's the best place to do that?
Probably LinkedIn. I'm not super active on social media, but I am out there and I check my messages. So that's probably the best place.
Fantastic. Well, Wendy, thank you so much. This was really exceptional, really fun for me. And I hope that others find it equally as inspiring as I did. I hope that for those of you that are listening, thank you as always. I appreciate your time, and I hope you can take some of this incredible insights and some of the practice that we shared today and carry that back to do some good work in your organization, because this is really meaningful stuff. And the proof is in what you've seen them do financially, what you've seen them accomplish from a workplace awards perspective. So use that, go do some good, and please remember, check in with the people that matter the most to you. It might be the most important thing you could do today. Till next time.